Hi, everybody. Today's Monday, March 23rd, 2026, and our dear friend, our brother, Professor Ted Postol is here with us. Welcome back, Ted.
Nice to be here. Very much nice to be here.
Ted, let's start with the conflict, with the war in the Middle East between the United States and Iran. Israel is part of that war. And here is Donald Trump today is talking about that there is something going on. We are, negotiating all of it. It seems that he's trying to manipulate the market, and he feels that this way he can do something to influence the market. Because what we've heard from the Iranian officials, there was no direct and indirect talk in the last 24 days. So it's Donald Trump is making something up. But putting all these all these sort of political moves on the part of the Donald Trump aside, how do you see this situation? Yesterday we've learned about the two missiles getting to Damona and Arad.
Yes.
And what can we understand about the current situation with the air defense system, with the missiles, and the dynamic of the war?
Well, I think the air defense doesn't exist. I mean, it's a fiction. It's been a fiction from the beginning. Now they're talking about running out of interceptors, which I think is true. But the interceptors weren't doing a very good job to begin with. So, right from the beginning, we really haven't seen any significant contributions from the missile defenses. Now, I want to be very circumspect. I apologize to the audience, but uh, I think there is. Well, I have some very reliable information from Israel, and I think the situation there is, in my judgment, not very good. Which, of course, is important for people to understand because the blackouts are the Israeli information control is, as far as I can tell, does nothing for the public in Israel who is suffering. Just of course, just as the public in Iran is suffering greatly, and these blackouts really conceal information from people who might, by reacting, have some constructive influence on the outcome of this, on the evolution of this terrible war, this war of choice, as most people point out. And, the indications are not changed with regard to Israel in the sense that there's no question that significant damage is being done. It's not on the scale that is occurring in Tehran, but Israel is a smaller country, and disrupting it is a much less demanding job. And of course, the objective of Tehran is to disrupt Israel as best it can, and it seems to me it's succeeding very well. I mean, the air raid sirens are going off several times a night. People have no choice but to take shelter. This, of course, disrupts their whole family environments. In the case of some people, who have shelters, not everyone appears to have shelters, although I thought that was the case, but I've learned differently. And so people open their shelters to neighbors. People are sleeping on mats underground. Many people are homeless. They haven't been killed or injured, but they're homeless. There are many killed, there are many injured. Um, Israel has a pretty good civil defense effort, which basically means taking shelter. That is fortunately saving lives, but the disruption to the society is tremendous. And that's a good effect from the point of view of the Iranian government in terms of making the Israeli government take notice for what they are doing for their unjust aggression toward Tehran. So, of course, as usual in war or in many wars, the people in between, populations of Iran and Israel, are suffering the most. Uh, Obviously, I mean, I have had no contact with Iranians, but it seems to me it's worse in Iran, although it's a bigger country and it's somewhat more diluted. But killing all these people for no reason at all, not to mention schools and destroying schools and uh, hospitals, and it's just unconscionable. But my concern at the moment has not been so much the air defenses, because it's important that people understand that these air defenses have never been functioning, because it's important to understand that this is a gigantic fraud that has been perpetrated by the US government and the Israeli government on American and Israeli citizens, not to mention Europeans who have paid enormous amounts of money for air defense systems that do not work against ballistic missiles. They do work against aircraft and drones. But that's another discussion. And of course, when they run out of interceptors, it means that the most problematic threat that the Israelis and others face now are the drones, because the drones are extremely accurate. They can be programmed from thousands of kilometers range. They have the ability to look at the targets prior to the final homing phase, and they essentially can run into the targets of interest. And we have seen that in the first day of the war. I mean, when the Iranians basically destroyed the entire base of missile defense radars in Israel. Now, from my point of view, speaking as a person who looks at it from a military point of view, that was the most important first step in a process where the Iranians are going about destroying all the air defense radars as well. There is no air defense. Without radars, you have no air defense. You can't shoot down drones. And those drones are, from the point of view of interceptor capabilities, relatively easy to hit. But if you don't have radars to observe the incoming drones and track them, those interceptors are useless. And we are now getting to a second phase where the Iranians are able to tear down the remnants of air defense being distinct from ballistic missile defense. And those air defense capabilities are critical because the drones are extraordinarily accurate. So the drones and cruise missiles will now begin to become the major inflictors of damage as things proceed. And in Dimona, we saw what looks like a couple of ballistic missiles with significant warheads on them come in and do damage. There's some nonsense about falling debris. There's no falling debris. These things came in. They were unengaged, or if they were engaged, there was some evidence. I've been very busy trying to do analysis. My problem is I can't follow the news and do analysis at the same time, and I'm trying to identify issues that the audience should be thinking about in the future, at least. And the issue I will talk mostly about now is the potential escalation to nuclear weapon use. Because to me, this is the gravest danger we now face, because Iran is now beginning to bring the full weight of its strike capabilities to bear on Israel and the military installations in the Persian Gulf. And this is going to do more and more and more damage, and it's going to cause more and more desperation in the Israeli and the US government. So we saw a very, I want to underscore, I don't take a lot of solace in this, but we saw a little bit of sense shown by Donald Trump when he stepped back from this unbelievably escalatory threat to destroy Iran's energy production system. And the Iranians basically told him what anybody could have told him. His advisors, I presume, told him this, that the Iranians are in a position to destroy the energy production facilities throughout the Middle East, which is what apparently the Iranians returned as a threat. And it's good that somebody was listening. Somebody in the White, I presume it's the intelligence people who went to Trump, he obviously didn't listen to them initially, but basically said, you're going to have trouble like you have never seen before if you go ahead, because the Iranians will respond. They're in a war for survival, and they're not fooling around. They have reached the point where it's clear to them. I'm not speaking for the Iranians, but I'm speaking as a person who observed their situation. It's clear to them that they will get no relief of any kind unless they make it clear that if you don't give them some space, they're going to bring everything down with them. That's what they're saying, in a more polite way, but that's basically what they're saying. And I don't think they have a choice myself. I mean, in their position, I would do the same. I mean, they agreed to this joint comprehensive plan of action in 2015, which was an exceptionally constraining agreement, which I take as an indication that they really weren't ever trying to, well, maybe at some point earlier, they were thinking about building nuclear weapons, but there's no way they would have agreed to this joint comprehensive plan of action if they ever intended to have a nuclear weapon or wanted a nuclear weapon. Trump, of course, withdrew from the agreement, saying it was inadequate. There's no way that agreement was inadequate. It was a tremendously constraining agreement. Tremendous. I can talk about that sometime, but people are interested. But a tremendously constraining agreement, and it really, if people had followed the terms of that agreement, and those terms included relief for Iran, economic relief for Iran, which was not followed through as promised. If that had happened, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in today. So it all falls on Mr. Trump and his reckless behavior. Incidentally, a lot of it falls on Biden too, because when Biden took over after Trump had withdrawn from the agreement, he sat on his buttocks and did nothing to bring that agreement back in. The agreement should have gone in immediately. And Biden instead said, well, let's renegotiate it. Let's see if we can get something else out of this is the American negotiating attitude. This is all these extremist elements, many of them academics too, incidentally. My friends at Stanford, who I like to bring up, and completely misinformed about this, and not recognizing that when you reach an agreement, you have an agreement. If you and I agree if I agree to sell you an automobile, and you agree to pay a certain price, I can't come back to you later and say, well, I've decided you really should pay twice the price. I really think that's something. That's not an agreement, and what diplomacy is no different from interactions between human beings. We have trust in each other. We understand the rules. We have implicit rules that we both come to a process. We come into the process with a certain common understanding of what the rules of engagement are. And when we reach an agreement, we stick by it. We don't just arbitrarily change it, or if we want to change it, We could. I could say, well, the car I'm selling you, I realized is not as, it's not as, I actually inadvertently misinformed you. It's really not in the same shape I thought it was in. I really should charge you less. That's what a fair agreement is about. We aim at building trust so that the next time we talk with each other and we have an agreement to make, we understand that both sides are aware and respect the interests of the other partner in the agreement. It's a partnership. These people don't behave that way. And they have destroyed the whole foundation of diplomacy, not only between Iran and the rest of the Western world, but also between Russia and China and the rest of the Western world. So we've got a lot of building to do, we being the American government. And if there's a new government at some point, we don't need another Biden replacement. We need people who go in and say, we realize this situation is unacceptable, has been unacceptable, and we are going to demonstrate that we understand what an agreement is and we understand how to keep the terms, make an agreement with good faith. And instead of taking all this, we got to take advantage. No, the agreement has to meet the needs of the different parties involved. And both parties have to understand that there are needs that each party has and make compromises that are compatible with their own needs, and then in good faith follow through. That's the way an agreement runs. You can't say, oh, now I have an ability to screw them on this. It doesn't work that way. If it works that way, you're going to be in the situation the United States is now in. Nobody trusts you, and nobody should trust you. So that's the situation we're in. Now, what I'd like to talk about now is the grave danger we have of an escalation to nuclear war. As I mentioned earlier, we have a very dim ray of light in the Trump backing away from this absolutely crazy and outrageous threat he made against the Iranians, and understanding that they meant business. But what is of concern to me, and I hope, and I think it will be to your audience as well, because everybody's trying to understand what's going on, and war is fundamentally unpredictable, is as this conflict evolves, the situation of both sides is going to be changing. And the Iranian leverage is going to be increasing. It seems that way. I was not sure of this initially, incidentally. I was skeptical that Iran could do the tremendous levels of damage with ballistic missiles that they're now achieving. Part of that, I might say, has to do with the estimated accuracy of their ballistic missiles, which I talked about on several occasions. In the earliest attacks, the accuracy of those missiles were less. They were not as accurate as the missiles we're now seeing. Now, I had no way of knowing. I mean, I was suspicious of this, that they were using older missiles. And the purpose they had in mind was to cause the Israelis to use up their interceptors on the older missiles, which were not very effective to begin with because many of them were breaking up at high altitudes. Many of the warheads went to ground and clearly did not explode. You could see that there were no flashes on the horizons in many cases. So those warheads were not as reliable as the warheads on the more modern ballistic missiles, which are re-entering on more stable trajectories. So we're now beginning to see a shift. Now, what we don't know, but we can make a pretty reasonable guess about, is how many of these more modern ballistic missiles the Iranians have. Well, we don't know. But we also don't know how many modern drones the Iranians have. And we can bet, in the case of the drones, that there are a boatload of these drones, that the drones are more numerous in large, in significant numbers relative to the ballistic missiles. They're just so much less expensive to make. They're so much easier to manufacture. The base for manufacturing them is available elsewhere. I mean, China can manufacture these things at a fantastic rate. We don't know how much help the Chinese will choose to give the Iranians, and they may well be doing it or will do it. The Russians are the same. These Shahad type drones, or which the Russians, I guess, call Jiran drones, are very similar, easily modified if transferred from one country to the other for special purposes. The technologies are all interchangeable and compatible. They're universal. And this drone war can go on for a very long time. And without air defenses, the weight of capability inevitably goes to the Iranians. So I'm guessing, again, it's a guess, that we will continue to see large amounts of damage from ballistic missiles, no question. But I think the significant levels of military damage and degradation of the general air defense and military capabilities in Israel and the Gulf are going to be accumulating from drone attacks. At least that's my best guess. But as the situation further deteriorates for Israel and the West, the question of whether a nuclear response might eventually come up, particularly on the part of the Israelis, who may eventually get to a point where they begin to see their survival as a state under threat. And I think that could occur. I think the Israelis are now suffering, I would call it serious damage, but not existential. I mean, the society is rich, it's robust, it has many, it has been under attack many times, so it has developed many passive defense capabilities that will help keep deaths down. The total weight of munitions that can be delivered by Iran is much lower than what has so far been delivered to Iran. Over time, it may change. That may change. And so the situation is bad and should be getting people's attention, but it's not necessarily existential, at least as far as I can tell. Enough that anybody with common sense would be talking about stopping this. But we're not dealing with people who are showing much common sense. So that's my concern. Now, I sat down and said to myself, what could Iranian military planners be thinking about with regard to retaliating against an Israeli nuclear strike on Iran? Because I do not believe, nothing is predictable, but I do not believe that Iran would strike with nuclear weapons against Israel first. I think the Iranians are very sensible. They've had enough, and I don't blame them. And they want this thing ended. And they want all these attacks on them and this constant attempt to crush them to end. And they're going to follow this through, no question. And no question from my point of view. So at some point, things are going to get really hairy because the Israeli government is led by messianic lunatics. We have a gangster sociopath in charge of the American government. He may be showing signs of dementia. I can't tell because this guy is so nuts that it's hard for me to tell. He's not surrounded by many people who are responsible, although I think there are some people who are there who They're not very admirable people, but they know better. I think this guy J.D. Vance is not crazy. He's without any ethical standards of any kind, but that's different from being crazy and suicidal for the country. And I think he may eventually play a constructive role if he's in a position to do so. If it doesn't cost them any, it's like a lot of these people, I like to describe them, they'll do the right thing if it doesn't cost them anything. So he's in that category. He surrounded Tulsi Gabbard, although she's made very bad judgments in my view. I think she understands the situation. I do think she's very smart. And I do think she's going to stick to her guns with regard to telling the truth. I think she's hurt herself badly, but that's a different discussion. But I do think she knows what she's doing, and she's going to speak the truth to this lunatic. And she's going to have some support, I think. I'm hopeful from someone like Vance. I mean, she's not going to be totally out in left field as she has been. So I'm praying that some form of rationality will possibly play a role in the future. But this Netanyahu is a man who I just don't know how to establish boundaries for him, and he's surrounded by these messianic religious lunatics who they remind me.
But he's becoming an AI character recently because mostly he's hiding somewhere because he's not out that much.
It's like this. I think I told you this joke of this Israeli friend of mine where I said to him, he was dragging me to this Wailing Wall, and I said, Reuven, I feel like we're going back 5,000 years. And Reuven says to me, oh, no, much further. and that's the way I feel about these people. They're crazy. 5,000 years is not enough time to go back describing them. Anyway, so hopefully the forces of rationality, which do exist in Israel. I mean, I know many people who are quite rational. They're not in control. But I'm hopeful that some people within the society who have rational and deep understanding of how dangerous this situation is will eventually begin to influence the situation. I don't know. I'm just hoping. But if my objective in the discussion to follow is to explain to people that Israel, and I'm explaining to everybody, I'm explaining this to Americans, Western Europeans, Israelis. I want Israelis to know this. I want the average Iranian to know this. I want the Gulf state leaders to know this, that a nuclear attack on Iran will almost certainly be answered by an attack on Israel, on a nuclear attack on Israel. Iran has the capacity to do this. They may not be a nuclear weapon state now, but if they are hit, they can sit in those tunnels because they can't close the country down. With even tens or dozens of nuclear weapons on Iran will not end Iran as a functioning, diversified state. Its underground facilities will continue to function, and they will be able to take that 408 kilograms of uranium hexafluoride they now have and convert them to 10 or 11 atomic bombs. Now, those atomic bombs are different from the modern weapons that I have talked about in the past. The modern weapons I've talked about tend to be thermonuclear weapons, much higher yields. They're the kinds of weapons that the United States and Russia deploy, China now. These are much lower yield bombs, but people should make no mistake. They are as deadly or more deadly than the more higher yield weapons because you can use them efficiently. And I sat down and I asked myself, if I were, and I incidentally, I have worked on nuclear weapon attack planning. Maybe I should be tried as a war criminal sometime in the future. But when I was in the Pentagon, I looked at war plans, detailed, real war plans, and looked at the ground zeros, and looked at matters of optimizing those attacks. And what do I mean when I say optimizing those attacks? Those attacks were technically carefully optimized to do the most damage you can do with the available destructive capability. Okay? That's what optimization means when you talk about optimizing a nuclear attack. You're talking about optimizing death and destruction, maximizing death and destruction. So if you're a military planner in Iran and your country has been attacked and you have one group of people fabricating the weapons and another group planning how to use them, well, let me show you how they might use them. And let me tell you, might is a weak statement because I think this is a prediction. I think this is certainly what could happen among many other kinds of things that could happen. And one of the things to do would be to go after Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is the big population center. It's a large area target. It's a very dense target. It's the economic and population center for Israel. There are other, of course, important centers. But this is the one place you would certainly attack among others. So I sat down and said, what would happen if I took 3 of my 10 or 11 atomic bombs? These are the things that are no more damaging than what destroyed Hiroshima in 1945. And I laid them down in a pattern on the most densely populated areas of Tel Aviv. Now, I lay them down with a deep understanding of the nuclear weapons effects. I don't sit around doing stupid things like thinking about blast alone. There's going to be blast, there's going to be nuclear radiation, and there's going to be firestorms that are produced by these weapons. And the firestorms, if I space the weapons out, can propagate and coalesce to make larger areas of fire than I could get with the individual weapons. And so I would space them accordingly. So let's look at slide 1.
Yeah.
Okay, this slide shows you 3 10 to 15 kiloton low yield atomic weapons. So these are different. They're fundamentally similar, but the physical effects express themselves in a different manner. First of all, what I've shown in the middle is I put little icons for the fireballs. So to remind your audience, the nuclear weapon detonates. In this case, these are low-yield nuclear weapons. So the fireballs are balls of superheated air, which are about 1% the density of air because the nuclear weapon is very hot. In this particular case, the interior of the nuclear weapon is about 10 or 15 million degrees Kelvin. Thermonuclear weapon might be 100 million degrees Kelvin. So it's a lot hotter. But 10 million degrees is plenty hot. And what that fireball is a region of superheated atmosphere that has been heated to a temperature. This is at the maximum. It's forming a bubble in the air. It's maybe a few hundred meters, a fraction of a kilometer in diameter. So it's not miles in diameter. Its surface temperature is about 7,000 or 8,000 degrees Kelvin, which is a couple of thousand degrees hotter than the surface of the sun. And that yellow area below is the area on the ground where fires will be set. So this is showing you the rough area. Notice there are areas in between where where the fireballs will not necessarily be bright enough to set buildings and outside trees on fire. They're open areas. And that's intentional. I've spread this thing out intentionally far enough so this occurs. Now, something different that occurs with the lower yield nuclear weapons that you don't experience with the higher yield nuclear weapons is what's called the prompt nuclear radiation from the radioactive products that underwent this nuclear disintegration to to release all this energy. So you had uranium-235 and these are uranium weapons. We're not talking plutonium. They break up, and they break up into strontium and cobalt and xenon and all kinds of tinier nuclear fragments. Those fragments are very close together when the nucleus disintegrates. The electric field is very strong and long and blows them apart, and they give up and they release a tremendous amount of kinetic and electromagnetic energy. The kinetic energy is small relative to the light and heat because when the temperature is so high, most of the energy is in light and heat, not physical expansion. So, but these materials are undergoing nuclear reactions too, independent of the fact that they're creating a very hot ball of air. They're giving off nuclear radiation. Now, normally with a very high yield weapon, you would, if you were in a region where this nuclear radiation was very strong, you'd already be dead from the effects of blast and heat because the higher yield would create so much blast and heat relative to the nuclear radiation that it wouldn't matter that there was this nuclear radiation. But with these lower yield weapons, you're going to have nuclear radiation that you could experience relative to the blast and yield. I'll describe that shortly, but you have what's called, and this is sometimes called prompt radiation. So the fireball is radiating light and heat. There's a blast wave projecting out from it, and at the same time, gamma rays and neutrons from these nuclear radiations from the disintegrating nuclear material. And if you're in close enough where you might imagine, surviving for some short interval of time from blast and heat, you could still get enough prompt radiation to kill you. You get them all at once, of course. So it's kind of it has to do with luck. If you're lucky, you're in direct path and you go quickly. So if we look at slide 2, I'm not talking about the radiation now from the nuclear radiation. I'm just talking about the fires that are set. Radiation has been, and I'll talk about that shortly, but but you have these regions, they're set on fire. Now, if we look at slide 3, you can see the instantaneous effects of the flash, because in the middle you see the white cloud of the rising mushroom cloud. Well, the rising mushroom cloud is this vast, heated, buoyant ball of superheated air. Incidentally, that superheated air is in part white because it's filled with moisture from lower altitudes that's rising up and cooling and condensing into water droplets. And those water droplets are going to be important. So that's a water cloud to some extent. It's very radioactive. But that's different from the stem you see below, which is a smoke column, which is just following up the path that was created by the air, moving air from the buoyantly rising mushroom cloud, which is just buoyancy is carrying it forward. It's got a draft behind it. That draft is pulling in smoke from the fires that are violently burning on the ground. Now, the most violent fires are burning close in. Further out, the fires are not so violent yet. So instantly, within seconds, you have these violent. So if we go to slide 4, we just see the same situation with Hiroshima. The first slide was not, so same exact phenomena. Slide 5 just diagrams the phenomena. And the point of slide 5 here is to show you that the top of the cloud, which is depicted now as a yellow background or grayish background, those are very hot air, condensed water droplets, because as the cloud rises, it expands and cools, and there's water vapor up there that's going to be mixing with the ash that's coming up from the ground below. So if we go to slide 6, just to get a sense of what's happening on the ground, out to about half the diameter of the little red circles I showed you on slide 2, the blast wave is very intense along with the heat. So we're not at the outer edge. The outer edge, you don't see this kind of extreme. If we look at the 1 second after the detonation on the second to the right inset on the top row, you see the front end of this building burning off from the fireball. And then 5 or 10 seconds later, on the left, the lower inset, you see the shock wave arriving and striking and destroying the building. That's what would be going on the ground. It'd be 10 seconds, 20 seconds before the shock wave reached the edge of the red areas that I'm showing you. There would be fires already burning. Some of the fires would be put out by the wind. Some of the fires would be intensified. General blast damage would be everywhere. At the edge of the fire zone, you would see small fires burning, but those small fires would be burning without anybody to put them out. I mean, everyone is running for, people are hit with flying fragments. People are looking for loved ones if they haven't been killed. People have been severely burnt by the flash if they were unlucky enough to be in the site of the fireball. So what you have is, if you look at slide 7, areas that are closer in, burning violently because they've been set on fire very quickly. Not everything has been knocked down because the blast wave from this small nuclear weapon is not necessarily intense enough to knock down a lot of very strongly built concrete and steel buildings. Doesn't matter that they're knocked down. Everybody in them is dead or will die because everything will be on fire. There will be towering infernos. The whole city will be towering infernos, even at the edge of the fire zone, because the fires will be set inside taller buildings. There will be no way to stop the fires. There'll be no water pressure for sprinkler systems to work. And everything will just become a gigantic fire zone. So if we look at slide 8, what we will see is a zone of intense fires, the most intense fires within tens of minutes of the detonation. So we're talking tens of minutes now. I've tried to depict it as a zone of increasing intensity of fires in the middle. And then in the next slide, we begin to get the buoyantly rising air from the burning separate zones of fire. Let's go to slide 9, please. And what's happening here now is you have buoyantly rising air, which is driving, which is causing wind from the outside to move in from the cooler areas where air is more dense and flowing in, eventually becoming a gigantic mass fire. Let me show you. Let's go to slide 10. So this is what the whole area would look like. So by spacing the weapons out, I can intentionally create a zone of extraordinarily intense fire. So it's a different kind of, I mean, it's the result is equal, it's the same. Everyone is killed. I mean, this is not, there are no survivors in this zone. Everyone is killed. It's just a matter of whether it's tens of minutes or within a few hours, because the air temperature will rise to above the boiling point of water in this giant zone of maybe 20 or 25 square kilometers. So, large area. The air temperature driven by fire. The air temperature is not from the nuclear weapons, it's from combustion. It's from very high air speeds. The asphalt on the street will literally become molten and melt. Rock associated with buildings that will become superheated. People in underground shelters will be trapped. They will not be able to go anywhere because there'll be high winds, extraordinarily high wind temperatures, air temperatures. Those who are in shelters which can be sealed, some of them could be, some of them won't be, may be able to survive for hours before carbon monoxide and heating, and the heating from the stone above seeps into causing them to be gigantic ovens where they will either die of carbon monoxide poisoning if they're lucky, or will be roasted by the intense temperatures generated by the fires. So what we will see in slide 11 is this entire area burnt out. But this is not the area of total destruction. This looks too clean. It's much too clean to give you a true understanding of how devastating and how toxic the environment would be. So if we go to slide 12, what I've shown here is the range, the graph on the right is the most important. What basically this shows you that the vertical curve is the dose in air in rads. It's not that very important. Basically, the flat red line shows you the dose at which you would get enough radiation from the flash, the radioactive flash, which is emitted in seconds. This is happening in seconds. It's not a long time later. It's sometimes called prompt radiation. And that's going to go out to about a kilometer range. So if you're in a kilometer range of the detonation point, roughly half the diameter of those red circles, you will have received a lethal dose of radiation. You might receive somewhat less if you're in a building, you get some protection. If you're in a shelter, you get some protection. But there are all these different physical effects that are going to be occurring. And so you'll have this secondary effect from radiation. And of course, what slide 13 shows is this is the region of immediate lethal radiation. But what I'm not showing is the area that is subjected to what is called black rain. I showed you these radiation clouds, the mushroom clouds rising, which were sort of white, and below them you saw this black soot from combustion on the ground. That eventually all mixes into a mass fire zone. That water vapor, now that cloud will be black with soot, filled with soot. Soot is just incomplete combustion of materials on the ground. It's carbonaceous material, but the carbon is covered with materials that also did not burn. Could be nitric oxides, nitrous oxides, um, uh, um, uh, 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 things like literally cyanide, um, all kinds of combustible, partially combusted materials. This stuff is not only it's in the soot, but it's on the soot, and people will be breathing that in as the fire goes on, and that stuff will get into the lungs. Like nitric oxide will tend to block the oxygen absorption through the membranes in the lungs. Cyanide obviously will be poisoning people. The carbonaceous material will do damage to the delicate mucose on the inner lining of the lungs. That will create a tremendous toxic hazard to people on the ground who will be caught in the fire zone. And now, if we look at slide 14, we can see this is Hiroshima, and the crisscrossed area on the upper left side shows you an area of heavy rain that fell to the north and west, north and east, I'm sorry, north and west of the actual target area, which was burning violently. That was an area of rain. It was known as the Black Rain. That rain is, you have soot in the air, water vapor, which is condensing because the soot forms condensation regions in the sky for the water vapor to condense on. The water particles grow in large enough to become droplets and fall to the ground. And this was a black rain that fell to the ground. The black rain is radioactive. It contains toxic materials. And it can be falling intensely an hour or more after the rainfall. So if I show you slide 17, what I've done is projected that area of black rain from the one Hiroshima detonation onto one location, making an assumption about wind direction of the areas of Tel Aviv that would be subjected to this black rain. Now, of course, if we go to 18, I was very late. I have not had a chance to put all these graphics together. I'm literally putting it together. As you know, I was late for our presentation. You can see that there would be a vast area that would be subjected to intense rainfall filled with black toxic rain. Now, I do not have details of the extent of the contamination at this time. This will be for later discussion because I'm now in the process of doing the research on this, because most of my analysis has been for higher yield weapons when I tell people about nuclear. So this is a different situation. I mean, it's obviously deadly, but it's different in character. And I'm taking the trouble to lay it out because it's my experience from dealing with people in the past that if you lay it out and you talk about it in a candid way, it becomes more real. It's not just an abstract, oh, here's a blast area, everyone's dead. Well, of course, that's terrible, and that states the final fact. But what's really important to understand is how this happens, because if you understand how it happens, you begin to internalize it as a human being. And that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to help you understand what some poor human being, I'm trying to build the empathy that we all should have for other human beings. Some of us are lacking, unfortunately, but we should all have for other human beings by making this as real as I possibly can. That's what I'm doing. I'm not trying to punish the audience. I'm not trying to say, oh, look, let me show you all these terrible things. I'm trying to help you understand the reality. And my hope is that by understanding the reality, you will understand consequences in a more human way. And by being by having a more human understanding, you will be more motivated to do something to divert us from this path. And that's basically my aim in this kind of, very unpleasant discussion. So if we go to slide 22, what we have is an area of 20 odd kilometers, which is burning and sort of internally, hot air is rising. The temperature on the ground is above the boiling point of water. The air speeds a hurricane force. The air above is buoyantly rising. So, for example, if you wanted to fly a helicopter in to save some people, you couldn't do it. The upward moving airflows would be hundreds of miles per hour. The helicopter would be shaken to pieces. You could not fly in to save people. You're in that zone, you're gone, you're dead. There's no hope for you. So what you have is, like in slide 25, this tremendously, violently rising cloud, 25 to the right, of turbulently moving air filled with smoke, toxic smoke. Even an aircraft like a helicopter could not fly through it. There'd be no helping anybody. And when you get to 26, would show you the ground situation. You'd have literally tornadoes on the ground from unevenly burning areas would cause tornadoes to form. So wind speeds in some areas would be much higher than in others. Flying debris would be traveling at hundreds of miles per, you could be hit with flying debris. The flying debris would be violently burning flying debris. So the fires themselves, it would be like when you take a bellows and you put it into a fire and you make the fire more intense. This fire-generated winds would be tremendously higher situation you would see. Slide 32 just shows you how the streets would be filled with debris after the attack. The streets would be so hot. I'm talking tens of hours, maybe a day or two after this phenomenon. Notice buildings could be, this is Hamburg, but this could be Tel Aviv. Lots of buildings could still be standing because the blast wave would not have been intense enough to knock down everything. But everything combustible would be gone. And the heat contained in the rocks and the asphalt would be so great you could not bring a tracked vehicle into this area for days. So nobody in this area would survive. So if we look at slide 34, which shows you a small area of Hiroshima, what it looks like in slide 35 is very close to what you would see in downtown Tel Aviv. You'd see, next slide, please. It would look like this. But there would be 20, notice this is only a kilometer, 3,000 feet, 1 kilometer out. We're talking about 25 or so square kilometers of Tel Aviv would look like this if you took satellite photographs. So that's what the result would be if the Israeli political leadership said, we're going to attack Iran, and those guys will not be able to respond. So we're going to end this by a nuclear attack on Iran. And that would be the result for Israel. It would also be the result for those unfortunate victims of an Israeli attack on Iran in the zones where the Israelis hit with their relatively low-yield nuclear weapons. So the reason I'm going through this is I'm really trying to say to people, let's not let this happen. The idea that you can finish off Iran, if you some Israeli lunatic, by attacking Iran with nuclear weapons is a pipe dream. Iran will have the ability to construct the nuclear weapons. And it might be weeks or even a month or two later. But this will be the final outcome. And nobody will win. Nobody will win. So what I'm trying to say is sober up. Let's sober up and start thinking about bringing this thing to a stop. And I'll end here.
Yeah. I think everybody should understand the reality of using nuclear weapons. As you mentioned, it's going to be devastating for every party.
Don't think because they're lower yield weapons, the price isn't as high. It's just slightly different than how it plays out. But the net result is millions of people are dead. Millions of people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Hope the people who are in the decision makers in the United States, in Israel, in Iran, they're listening to you and what's.
Well, as usual, I hope I've ruined your day, the day of your audience. But I hope we're avoiding something that's worse in the future.
Exactly. Thank you, Ted. You always bring important issues to the scene, and many people must know about the reality of using nuclear weapons.
This is what Larry Wilkerson brings. He's pointing out these important things. I can't add to his discussion. He knows more about these other things than I'll ever know. But where I can point out is I can put meat and substance, technical substance on it that Larry can then run with. And that's what I'm trying to do here.
Thank you, Ted. And see you soon.
You take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.